Hey guys, so here's part 2 to the 1.7 day 2 notes. So we are continuing with solving absolute value inequalities. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit faster on these because on the first part I really kind of explained why we shaded and why we use certain things. Here I just want to make sure we can get that skill down of how to solve absolute value inequalities. Okay, for our number 3, we have absolute value of n minus 1 less than or equal to 3. Now, if you don't have this equal to bar down, make sure you put that, like if you have notes, make sure you put that bar down if you don't have it. If you do, you're good to go. Okay, once again, we need to create 2 inequalities. So that's what I'm going to do first. So I have n minus 1 less than or equal to 3. Then n minus 1, you flip the sign, greater than or equal to, negate the number, negative 3. Next thing we need to decide, is this an and or an or problem? This is a less than, so this is an and problem. Okay, next part, we solve. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So I get n is less than or equal to 4, and n is greater than or equal to negative 2. Now, because this is an and problem, we need to write what we just solved as a compound inequality. Okay, to write as a compound inequality, we place the variable, in this case n, in the middle, and then we put the smallest number on the left-hand side, biggest number on the left. So I have negative 2 and I have 4. Now remember, negative 2 is going to be smaller, so negative 2 is less than, don't forget the equal bar, less than or equal to n, while n is going to be less than or equal to 4. And we saw that basically when we solved for n is less than or equal to 4. So here's our solution so far. Now remember, that means any n value, okay, or any number we plug into n has to satisfy both inequalities. That's really why we also want to write as a compound inequality, because it makes it easier to know, does this n value, whatever it is, satisfy both inequalities? Okay, now our next step is to basically do the number line. Hopefully I have a number line. Nope, I don't have to. I don't have one, so I have to create it. So I'll just do that here. Okay, just like when we did the compound inequality, smallest number needs to be on the left-hand side. I'm going to put a 0, and then I have 4. Okay? So now, I need to figure out, do I have open or closed circles? Notice we have an equal bar, right? So since we have an equal bar, we used closed circles. Okay. Now, we need to figure out, do we shade in between these two numbers or opposite directions? Well, since this is an and problem, we're going to shade in between negative 2 and 4. Reason being, all the numbers in between has to satisfy both of these inequalities. And you can definitely check that by just plugging in numbers in for n. So like if we plug 0 in for n, 0 is in between negative 2 and 4. Meaning negative 2 is less than or equal to 0, and 0 is less than or equal to 4. Okay, last thing, so once we have done our number line, last thing we need to do is the interval notation. Okay, so when we shade in between here, right, that really means we kind of like have a segment. We have a starting point at negative 2, and then we have an ending point at 4. Now, we need to decide, do we have brackets or parentheses around these numbers? Well, because we have closed circles, meaning we had an equal bar, we use brackets. And that will be our interval notation. Okay, let's go ahead and do the next example, example 4. Now, if I'm ever going too fast, make sure you can always just pause the video, get the stuff written down, or you can always rewind as well. Okay, so the next one, number 4, we have absolute value of v minus 3 is greater than 4. Okay, step 1, write both of your inequalities. So v minus 3 is greater than 4. V minus 3. Flip the inequality, negate the number on the other side, is less than negative 4, okay? Remember, I took the absolute value bars off for these inequalities when I solve, okay? Next, I need to decide, is this an or an and problem? This is a greater. So this is an or. Okay. Now I solve. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides on both inequalities. So I get v is greater than 7. Then v is less than -1. And remember, this is or. So that means the numbers on our number line only have to satisfy at least one of the inequalities. So either our variable v is greater than 7 or it is less than -1. Right? It can be either or. Now I need to create my number line. Now because this is an or, we do not write it as a compound inequality. So now I put my numbers. So remember with our number line, smallest number on the left, I have 0 and then 7. Now I need to decide, are my circles open or closed on this number line? Well, because there is no equal bar, that means my circles are open on the -1 and on the +7. Okay. Now I need to decide, do I shade in between the -1 and 7 or opposite directions? Well, since this is an or problem, we're going to shade opposite directions. The reason being is a number only has to satisfy at least one of the inequalities. So a number only has to be either on the left-hand side or it can be on the right-hand side. So nothing in between. Okay. Okay, so now what we're going to do is write our interval notation. There we go. So remember, anytime we have something like this, notice that this shading is going to go on forever in the negative direction towards the left. We represent that as -infinity. And we kind of have a stopping point or circle at -1. Then we start up again at 7. And then we go on forever on the right-hand side, which is positive. We go to +infinity. Okay, anytime we have infinity signs, we always put parentheses around them. Now, for our numbers, though, we have to look. Do we have open or closed circles? We have open. Open circles means we're going to have parentheses around our numbers. This is also true because we don't have any equal bars. So we got boom, boom. Our last thing we need to do, because we have 2 parts here to indicate our interval notation or our solution, we have to use the union sign. It means that we're combining 2 or more things together. Okay, so don't forget that union sign. Okay, now let's go on to the next one. Okay, number 5, I would like you guys to go ahead and pause the video and do number 5 on your own. Okay, let's kind of go over this. Now, the hard part of this one is we do have a fraction. I kind of just want to go over this so we know how to get rid of the fraction. Everything else should be basically the same. So I have 1/2 y minus 3 greater than or equal to 2. So I'm creating my 2 inequalities to solve. The other one is 1/2 y minus 3. Flip this side and negate the 2. Now we need to decide, is this an or an and problem? This is greater. So this is an or problem. Okay? So for these, I'm going to solve. I'm going to add 3 to both sides on both of the inequalities. So I have 1/2 y is greater than or equal to, I think, 5. And then 1/2 y is less than or equal to 1. Now, how can we get rid of this 1/2? Okay, some of you might say divide by 1/2. You can do that. You just gotta be very careful if you are doing that in your calculator. Okay, if you do 5 divided by 1/2, remember the 1/2 has to be in parentheses. Okay, unless you are doing that 1/2 or the fraction feature in the TI calculators, then you can do it like that. Another way is to multiply by the reciprocal. So what would be the reciprocal of 1/2? Hopefully you guys said 2 over 1 or just 2. I'm going to do 2 over 1 because I do like to write it as a fraction since we are doing reciprocals. Okay. So this means y is greater than or equal. We do 5 times 2, which gives us 10. And then y is less than or equal to 1 times 2, which is 2. And this is an OR problem. So y is either greater than or equal to 10, or it's less than or equal to 2 here. Okay, now we do our number line. We put those numbers on there. So remember, 2 is at the left because that's the smallest, and then we have 10. Now notice we don't have any negative numbers, so I don't need to put 0. So if you have a negative and a positive number, go ahead and put 0 in between, but if you don't, then just put the 2 numbers. Make sure you leave enough space to kind of indicate like how far they are at. Now remember, because this is an OR, don't write it as a compound inequality. Now we need to decide, do we use open or closed circles? We use closed because we have equal bars. Remember, equal bars. Now, do we shade opposite directions or in between? It should be opposite directions. Okay. Our last thing we need to do is our interval notation. Okay, remember with these, because we are shading forever to the left, we use negative infinity. We have a stopping point at 2, and we restart at 10, and we go forever, right, to the right-hand side, so that's positive infinity. If you want to use the positive sign for that infinity, you can, you don't have to. Now, infinity signs, we always use parentheses. Now, for the 2 and 10, do we use parentheses or brackets? Hopefully you said brackets because we have closed circles, which means we have an equal bar. What's the last thing we need to put here? It is a union sign. Okay, now our last problem. This one I also would like you guys to go ahead and pause the video and do this on your own. So go ahead and do that. Okay, let's go over this. So just like we did before, create 2 inequalities. So this is absolute value of 4 minus 2, less than or equal to 8. So I have 4 minus 2u, less than or equal to 8. And I have 4 minus 2u, flip the sign, negate the number, negative 8. Now decide, is this an and or an or problem? This is a less than. So it is an and problem. So once we solve, we do need to write it as a compound inequality. Okay, on both of these, I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. So I have negative 2u less than or equal to 4, and negative 2u greater than or equal to, I think, negative 12. Now I divide both sides by negative 2. And I get u. Oh, let's figure this out. Hopefully some of you kind of remembered this. Remember when you like multiply or divide by a negative number? What do we have to do with that inequality sign? If you said we need to flip it, you are correct. So we have to flip this less than or equal to a greater than or equal to. Okay? Now, if you want to avoid that, what you would have had to do is actually move the negative 2u over to the other side and then subtract or add 8 to the other side. So that could be another way of solving if you don't want to try to flip the sign or you feel like you're going to forget. The idea is that you want to get the variable positive. So you can do that first so you don't have to do the flipping the sign later. Okay, so 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2. And then we get u. So we got to flip this sign as well. So it becomes a greater, which becomes a less than. I get positive 6. And so this is an and problem. Since it is an and problem, I need to create a compound inequality. U is in between. The smaller number, which is negative 2, is on the left-hand side. Bigger number on the right. Okay, because u should be bigger than negative 2, but smaller than 6. And so negative 2 is less than, don't forget the equal sign, and u is less than or equal to 6. Okay. Okay, so now we can create our number line and put our solution as that. So I have -2. I'm going to put 0 because we have a negative and a positive, and I have 6. We need to decide for our circles, open or closed. It should be closed because we have an equal bar underneath our inequalities. Okay, so do we shade opposite directions or in between? In between, because this is an and problem, meaning that all these numbers must satisfy both inequalities. Like if you plug it into it, it is both bigger than -2, but smaller than 6. Okay, last thing is the interval notation. This is like a line segment. We have a starting and stopping point. So we start at 2 and end at 6. Do we use brackets or parentheses? We should use brackets because we have closed circles, which indicate we have the equal bar. Okay, so that's basically all you're doing. You're solving for the inequality, you're putting it on a number line, and you're writing an interval notation. Make sure for the homework that you definitely read the instructions carefully because it will tell you how to write your interval notation, how to write your answers for the inequalities, and so on. Okay, if you have any questions, make sure you contact me. See you guys later.